At dawn, as the first light illuminates the vast fields of Hope Ranch, everything seems serene until chaos erupts when the family's cherished horses are stolen. Amid the turmoil, the most aggressive horse, long considered untamable, makes a shocking return, setting off a chain of events that will leave you stunned. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. Thank you. The sun broke over the horizon, casting a warm golden light across the sprawling fields of Hope Ranch. The rooster crowed with vigor, as though staking its claim as the herald of the new day. The damp earth bore the first imprints of horse hooves pressed into the soft, dew-laden ground. Ashley, are you planning to sleep through the whole morning, or do you intend to help me with the stables? Mr. Williams' gruff voice called from the yard, echoing with its usual authority. Ashley sighed, hastily tying her hair into a loose braid. Her heart beat with a mix of respect and faint frustration. Her father, a man of few words but firm expectations, had carried the weight of the family since her mother's passing. Though she gave her best effort, it seemed to Ashley that nothing was ever quite enough to meet his high standards. "I'm coming, Dad. Just a second," she called back energetically, masking her inner conflict. As she descended the stairs, she paused by the window to take in the sight of the bustling corral. Horses stirred, their soft nickers filling the air. Among them, Aurora stood out, her white coat gleaming like silver under the morning sun. A smile touched Ashley's lips. Aurora wasn't just her favorite horse. She was a confidant, a quiet companion who would listen to her most private musings during lonely nights. One day she whispered to herself, "Dad will see I can handle it all." Outside, Mr. William was already deep into his work, inspecting the stables. His wide-brimmed hat shaded a face hardened by years of labor, his calloused hands moving deftly as he surveyed the ranch. "Make sure the mare's water troughs are cleaned properly. And watch out for Blaze, he's still a danger," he warned, gesturing toward the far end of the corral. Blaze, a jet-black stallion with fiery eyes, snorted defiantly in his corner. Months earlier, Blaze had been bought for next to nothing, his previous owner having given up on the unruly horse. He was a magnificent creature, but his past was written in his scars. Neglect and mistreatment had left him wild and untrusting. Any attempt to approach him was met with an unrelenting fury, earning him the label of untamable. Ashley's gaze lingered on the stallion. There was something in his defiance that resonated deeply with her, an unspoken connection. She saw in him a kindred spirit, a raw, unrefined potential that others had overlooked. "Dad, what if I try? Maybe he just needs patience and some care," she suggested cautiously, knowing full well how her father might respond. Mr. William turned to her, his expression stern. Ashley, this isn't a game. That horse nearly tore Ethan's arm off last week. Some animals just can't be saved." But Ashley wasn't so easily deterred. Her father's pragmatism was well-intentioned, but she believed his heart wasn't as unyielding as his words. To her, Blaze wasn't a problem. He was a challenge, a chance to prove her worth and show that she could shoulder the responsibilities of the ranch. She decided to bide her time, tackling other tasks for now and forming her own careful plan to approach the stallion. As she cleaned the water troughs and tended to the horses, Aurora approached with a soft nicker, sensing her owner's unease. Ashley leaned her forehead against the mare's, exhaling deeply. "I wish things could be simpler, Aurora. Sometimes I feel like I'll never be good enough for him." Aurora shook her head gently, as if offering silent encouragement. Ashley couldn't help but smile. "Thanks, girl. At least I've always got you." The day passed in a blur of chores and quiet reflection. Life on Hope Ranch was demanding, yet there was a certain rhythm to the work that brought Ashley peace. Still, her thoughts kept drifting back to Blaze. The memory of his tense stance, his wary eyes lingered like a puzzle she couldn't solve. As the sun dipped low, painting the fields in hues of orange and gold, Ashley watched the stallion from a distance. In his restless movements and guarded gaze, she saw more than an untamed beast. She saw a reflection of herself, both of them striving to find their place in a world that always seemed to ask too much. "One day, Blaze," she murmured softly, We'll prove them wrong together. The night descended on the ranch like a heavy shroud, blanketing everything in an eerie stillness punctuated by a barely perceptible tension. Clouds gathered in the sky, thick and ominous, foretelling an approaching storm. The air carried that earthy, damp scent that always announced impending rain. Exhausted from a long day's work, Ashley retreated to the kitchen, joining her father, Mr. William. His face was somber, his body bent from weariness, and, true to his nature, he said little. "Dad, do you think the weather will clear up tomorrow?" she asked, breaking the silence as she checked the cracks in the window to ensure no water would seep through. "Who knows, meager, but if it rains, let it not be too harsh." "These lands have had enough from the last downpour," he replied, his words carrying a weight that Ashley couldn't ignore. A low rumble of thunder rolled in the distance, causing the old wood of the house to groan in response. The first gust of wind rattled the windows, and soon raindrops began to drum a relentless rhythm on the roof. "Go to bed, Ashley. Tomorrow will be another long day," Mr. Williams said as he stood, wincing at the pain in his back. She nodded, but something in the ferocity of the wind and the unyielding rain kept her awake. There was something in the air, an unsettling feeling she couldn't shake. It was past midnight when the dog's frantic barking shattered the uneasy quiet of the storm. Ashley bolted upright, her heart pounding. The barking was interspersed with distant shouts and the unmistakable sounds of restless horses. "Dad, something's happening at the corral," she yelled, rushing to the door. Mr. William, still half asleep, grabbed the machete hanging by the entrance and followed her outside. The rain was so heavy they could barely see a few feet ahead, but the faint glow of a lantern swaying in the barn revealed shadowy figures, moving quickly. "They're thieves," Mr. William roared, charging forward without hesitation. "Dad, wait!" Ashley called, trying to stop him, but he was already gone. Chaos reigned in the corral. Horses whinnied in terror as the intruders herded them toward a waiting truck. Aurora, her beautiful white mare, shone even in the downpour as she fought against the rope tied around her neck. Ashley's chest tightened at the sight. "Get your filthy hands off my animals, you bastards," Mr. William bellowed, brandishing his machete. One of the men turned to face him, and though Mr. William fought fiercely, he was outnumbered. A swift, brutal blow to his side sent him crumpling to the ground, motionless under the relentless rain. "Dad!" Ashley screamed, running toward him, but one of the thieves shoved her to the ground. From the mud, she could only watch as they loaded Aurora and the other horses into the truck. The tires spun in the muck, and then they were gone, swallowed by the darkness. When it was over, the corral was a desolate wreck. A few horses that had escaped huddled nervously nearby, and deep tire tracks scarred the earth. Ashley knelt beside her father, trembling from cold and despair. "Hang on, Dad. I'll get help," she whispered, tears mixing with the rain streaming down her face. Morning arrived slowly, with a shy sun struggling to break through the gray clouds. Ashley sat by her father's bedside, her hands still caked with dried mud. They had spent their last few dollars on the town doctor, but his injuries were severe and recovery would be slow. The money, the bills, the horses, Mr. William rasped weakly. "Don't worry about that, Dad. I'll figure it out." "We'll get through this somehow," Ashley said, though the weight of uncertainty threatened to crush her. Stepping out into the yard, she surveyed what remained of the ranch. The empty stables, the ruined corral, and the absence of Aurora felt like a hollow ache in her chest. Then as she gazed toward the horizon, something caught her eye, a figure she hadn't expected. The black stallion stood still in the middle of the field, his mane wild in the wind. His eyes burned with an intensity Ashley couldn't decipher, as though he too was searching for something. "Why didn't you leave with the others?" she murmured, her voice soft as she approached him cautiously. The storm lingered, unmoving, as if it were merely observing her, allowing her to draw closer than it ever had before. Ashley, her hand trembling slightly, extended it cautiously toward the horse, but the massive black stallion stepped back, a subtle retreat that spoke volumes. It wasn't ready to trust. "It's okay," she murmured softly, her voice gentle and steady. "We'll take this slow." At that moment, Ashley realized she couldn't give up. The stallion, Thunder, wasn't just another horse. It was her final chance to restore what her family's ranch had lost. The next morning, the crisp dawn air carried with it a fragile sense of hope. Long before the sun rose completely, Ashley was already awake. She wrapped herself in her old weathered shawl and stepped out into the corral. There, under the faint light of early morning, stood Thunder, a towering shadow that seemed almost otherworldly. The horse stood still, but its taut muscles betrayed a readiness to bolt at the slightest provocation. Taking a deep breath, Ashley steadied herself. "I can't fail," she whispered, as if saying it out loud would make it true. She carried a bucket of fresh water in one hand and a small bundle of hay in the other. Every step was deliberate, her pace unhurried. She knew patience would be her greatest ally. "Good morning, big guy," she said softly, her voice calm despite the slight tremor in her hands. The horse turned its head toward her, its dark eyes glinting with a mixture of fear and defiance. It didn't back away, but it didn't come closer either. Ashley placed the hay down a safe distance away and stepped back, keeping still as she waited, giving him the choice to approach. For long minutes, he ignored her entirely. Then finally, the stallion took a hesitant step forward, reaching for the hay. "That's it," Ashley whispered, her voice so quiet it was almost carried away by the wind. It was a small breakthrough, but enough for a first step. The following days were a relentless test, not only of her resolve with the horse, but also of her ability to face her own fears and limitations. Each attempt to close the gap between them was met with fierce resistance. Thunder's reactions were sharp and unpredictable. One afternoon, when Ashley tried to brush his back with a soft rope, the stallion reared violently, his hooves pouring the air. The sudden force sent her sprawling backward into the mud. Pain shot through her body as she struggled to catch her breath. From the porch, her father, Mr. William, watched with a stony expression. "I told you, Ashley," he said flatly. "That horse is a lost cause. You're wasting your time. Focus on something else." But Ashley wasn't ready to quit. She pushed herself up, wiping the mud from her face. Her ribs ached and her pride was bruised, but her determination burned brighter. Looking directly at her father, she said, "No, Dad, not yet. I have to try again." Mr. Williams shook his head and turned away, retreating into the house, leaving her alone beneath the overcast sky. That night, after another exhausting and fruitless day, Ashley sat by the window of her bedroom, gazing out at the corral. Memories of her mother filled her mind, her voice warm and wise, telling stories about how animals could sense the true hearts of people. Her mother always said that love and patience could break through even the tallest barriers. What would Mom say if she were here? Ashley asked herself softly, clutching the old quilt that had belonged to her mother. In her heart, she already knew the answer: don't give up. One crisp morning, something shifted. As usual, Ashley entered the corral with quiet, steady steps. She had no expectations, only the hope to be near the horse. This time, Thunder didn't back away. Ashley froze, barely breathing. Slowly, she extended her hand, her palm open and unthreatening. The stallion tensed, every muscle in his body coiled like a spring, ready to flee. But he didn't. After what felt like an eternity, his nose brushed against her hand. A wave of emotion surged through her, tears welling up as she whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't full trust, not yet, but it was a bridge, their first fragile connection. That evening, under a sky scattered with stars and a luminous full moon, Ashley decided to take another step. She sat in the corral, a respectful distance away from the horse, and began to speak in a low, soothing voice. "You know," she started, her words gentle, "when I was a little girl, I dreamed of a ranch filled with happy, free horses. My mom used to tell me every animal has its own spirit, and it's our job to help them find their place." Ashley paused, her gaze fixed on the approaching storm. It seemed to echo her thoughts, distant yet deeply resonant. "Sometimes I feel like I don't even know my place," she murmured. "My dad always expects so much from me, and I don't know if I'll ever make him proud. I lost my mom when I needed her most, and now it feels like I'm facing this all alone." To her surprise, the horse she called Blaze stepped forward, closing the gap between them. Ashley held her breath as the animal lowered its head slightly, a quiet gesture that felt almost like acknowledgement of her pain. "Thank you for staying," Ashley whispered, running her fingers through Blaze's mane. "I promise I won't give up on you." The next morning, while cleaning out the old barn, something unusual caught her eye. Beneath a pile of damp hay, a fragment of black fabric poked out, dusted with dirt and stains. Ashley picked it up carefully, her fingers brushing over a small embroidered logo in one corner. It depicted a winged horse encircled by faint lettering she couldn't quite decipher. "What's this?" she wondered aloud, turning the fabric over for a closer look. There was no doubt it didn't belong on their ranch. The logo seemed vaguely familiar, as though she had seen it somewhere before. Then it hit her. Snippets of conversations she'd overheard at the local store, hushed whispers about a group notorious for trafficking horses across the region. "They say they're pros," a neighbor had mentioned weeks ago, got connections out of state too. Back then, Ashley hadn't paid it any mind. Now, however, the pieces were starting to fall into place. That night, as she helped her father settle into bed, she decided to share her discovery. "Dad, I think I found a clue about the people who took Aurora," she said, holding out the to see. Mr. William furrowed his brow, examining it under the dim bedroom light. "And what do you plan to do with this, Ashley?" he asked, his tone tinged with skepticism. "Chase after them like some cowboy movie? These men are dangerous. Dad, we can't just stand by and do nothing. I won't let everything you've built here be taken away like this." He sighed deeply, letting the fabric drop onto the bedspread. "You're stubborn, just like your mother," he muttered, though there was a flicker of pride in his voice. "If you're going to do this, at least do it right. Ararat, by getting that horse of yours ready." From that day forward, Ashley devoted every spare moment to training Storm. They spent hours in the open fields working on sprints and perfecting maneuvers to handle obstacles. The once unruly horse began responding to her commands with surprising precision. Some days they made strides, but on others, Storm's wild temperament resurfaced. Even so, Ashley refused to give up. Each small victory rekindled her hope. During one grueling session, Mr. William appeared at the edge of the field, leaning on his cane. Though his steps were limited, he had come to observe from a distance. "He's strong," he called out, "but he's still got a long way to go." "I know, Dad," Ashley replied, wiping sweat from her brow. "But we'll get there. We're learning together." Her father nodded slowly. "Come see me after lunch. I'll teach you a technique I use for stubborn horses. Might come in handy." For the first time, Ashley felt her father's trust in her begin to grow. A week later, the moment to act finally arrived. The full moon bathed the fields in silver light as Ashley prepared to leave. Her bag was packed with essentials, some food, a flashlight, and the fabric scrap bearing the enigmatic logo. She had mapped out the mountains in her mind, recalling hidden spots from childhood trips with her father to collect wood. Mr. William sat quietly on the porch, watching as Ashley adjusted Blaze's saddle. At last, he broke the silence. "Be careful, Ashley, and remember, you don't need to prove anything to me. Do this because you believe in it, not for me." Ashley turned to him, her eyes alight with determination. "I'm bringing Aurora back, Dad, not just for her, but for us." She climbed onto Blaze's back. The horse let out a soft neigh, as if sensing the weight of what lay ahead. Together they rode into the moonlit horizon, ready to face whatever awaited them. With one last glance at the ranch, Ashley spurred her horse forward, heading into the shadowy embrace of the mountains. Hours later, as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, streaking the sky with hues of amber and gold, she paused in a clearing. The soft morning light offered just enough clarity to survey the terrain. Beside the narrow trail, something unusual caught her eye. A series of deep, parallel marks etched into the earth, as if multiple horses had passed through recently. Ashley dismounted carefully, her movements deliberate, and knelt to examine the tracks. She ran her fingers over the impressions, noting their depth and direction. "These are fresh," she thought, her pulse quickening. Nearby, she spotted a frayed and dirt-streaked rope, hastily discarded. "They're close," she whispered, her voice tense with both excitement and trepidation as her gaze swept the surrounding wilderness. The realization that the thieves might be just ahead sent a shiver down her spine, a mix of determination and fear swirling within her. The trail became increasingly treacherous as Ashley pressed on. Loose rocks and the steep inclines demanded her full attention, and tested the horses' sure-footedness. At one point, as they threaded their way through a narrow pass flanked by towering boulders, the ground beneath her horse's hooves began to crumble. "Careful!" Ashley shouted, pulling hard on the reins. Her horse, aptly named Blaze, reacted with remarkable agility, stepping back just in time to avoid plunging into a hidden ravine veiled by dense undergrowth. She exhaled shakily, the fear gripping her chest like a vice. "Thank you, my friend," she murmured, her trembling hand stroking Blaze's neck. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Despite the challenges, Ashley pressed on, every step an arduous test of both physical and emotional endurance. Doubt wasn't an option, not when she was so close to uncovering what she sought. 2 grueling days later, exhausted but resolute, she arrived at a small town nestled in a valley between jagged peaks. The modest adobe and wooden homes gave the place a deserted air, save for a pair of elderly men sitting outside a general store. "Good morning," Ashley greeted as she dismounted, her voice raspy from days of silence. One of the men, startled by her unexpected presence, studied her with curious eyes. "Where are you coming from, young lady?" he asked, his tone equal parts caution and intrigue. "A ranch to the south," Ashley replied. "I'm tracking a group of horse thieves. Have you seen anything unusual?" The old man's brow furrowed as he exchanged a glance with his companion. After a moment's hesitation, he pointed northward toward the rugged mountains that loomed in the distance. "They say there's a camp up there, near the dry riverbed. Folks who don't want to be found," he said in a hushed tone. A chill ran down Ashley's spine, but she acknowledged the information with a determined nod. "Thank you, that's all I needed to know." The silent man who had been quietly observing finally spoke. "Be careful, that's no place for a young woman to go alone." Ashley offered a faint smile as she patted Blaze's neck. "I'm not alone," she said confidently, mounting her horse once more. The next leg of the journey proved the most perilous. The path grew steeper, barely distinguishable amid the stones and tangled brush. Blaze pressed forward with a strength that seemed to echo Ashley's resolve, as though he understood the gravity of their mission. At one point, as they navigated a precarious ledge along a sheer cliff, the ground began to shift beneath Blaze's hooves. Ashley felt her heart seize as the horse struggled to regain his footing. "No!" she screamed, clutching the reins with desperate force. With an incredible display of power, Blaze planted his hind legs firmly and surged forward, pulling both himself and Ashley back onto solid ground. Ashley slid from the saddle, her body trembling, and threw her arms around Blaze's neck without thinking. "You're amazing," she whispered through tears, her fingers tangling in his mane. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Blaze snorted softly, as if accepting the praise, his steady strength grounding her once more. Night fell over the valley, blanketing the thieves' camp in a shroud of darkness and eerie quiet. Hidden among the underbrush, Ashley lay still, listening intently. The crunch of boots on the dry branches and the low murmur of rough voices mingled with the occasional soft whinny of the horses. Her heart pounded in her chest as she readied herself, determination hardening into resolve as the shadows deepened around her. Every sound seemed magnified in the stillness of the night, and Ashley controlled her breathing, careful not to give herself away. From her vantage point, she could make out Aurora's figure. Even in the dim light, the mare's once bright white coat stood out, though it had lost its luster. The poor creature looked frail, her head hung low, completely drained of energy. Seeing Aurora like that ignited something fierce inside Ashley. "I'll get you out of here," she whispered to herself, gripping Blaze's mane tightly. The horse stood quietly beside her, as if he too understood the gravity of the moment. Ashley spent hours watching the camp, counting the men who moved in the shadows. 6, maybe 7. Most of them appeared relaxed, some gathered near the fire, sharing bottles and laughing boisterously, while others busied themselves checking ropes and horse tack. She knew confronting them head-on was out of the question. Her only option was to rely on cunning. As the minutes ticked by, her plan started to take shape. Blaze would be the key to creating a distraction, but she needed the perfect moment when the men were sufficiently off guard. Around midnight, the men's laughter grew louder as they drank more. Some began to argue, their voices clashing with the serenity of the night. Ashley recognized her opportunity. "Listen, boy," she whispered into Blaze's ear, stroking his neck to steady any nerves. "I need you to run as fast as you can. Make as much noise as possible and lead them away from here. I'm counting on you, okay?" The horse snorted softly as if to signal his understanding. Removing his bridle to grant him freedom, Ashley led him closer to the camp's edge. When everything was ready, she slapped his flank with a firm hand. "Go!" Blaze bolted from the underbrush like an arrow, his powerful hooves pounding the ground and his neighs slicing through the silence. The noise jolted the men to their feet, confusion and alarm written all over their faces. "A loose horse!" one of them shouted, running toward the commotion. "Stop it before it gets away." Chaos erupted. 3 of the men chased after Blaze while 2 others barked frantic orders that were drowned out by the pandemonium. Hidden behind a stack of firewood, Ashley observed the scene, her heart hammering in her chest. When the shouting grew distant enough, she knew it was time to act. Emerging from her hiding place, with steps both cautious and determined, she made her way to the corral where Aurora was confined. The mare was surrounded by other restless horses, their unease palpable in the charged atmosphere. "Easy now, girl," Ashley murmured as she ran her fingers over the rusty lock on the gate. The mechanism resisted, but with a soft clink, it finally gave way. Aurora let out a small whinny which Ashley quickly quieted with soothing words and a gentle hand on her muzzle. "No noise, all right? We're getting out of here together." Next, Ashley turned her attention to the other horses. To ensure her escape, she needed to create absolute chaos. A stampede would scatter the thieves and buy her precious time. Her hands trembled slightly, but her resolve remained firm as she began unlocking the other stalls. One by one, the freed horses slipped into the night, their movements quiet except for the occasional snort or soft neigh. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until one of the largest horses, a commanding black stallion, kicked open his metal gate with a loud clang that reverberated like thunder in the still night. Ashley froze, her breath caught in her throat as she heard the agitated voices of the men behind her. "Something's happening in the corral," shouted one of the men. Shadows began to shift and move toward her, and Ashley realized her time had run out. Just as the men reached the corral, a dark figure burst from the underbrush, moving with astonishing speed. It was Blaze, charging back into the camp like a lightning bolt, whinnying fiercely and heading straight for the men. "Watch out!" one of them yelled, diving aside to avoid the oncoming horse. With sheer power and speed, Blaze sowed chaos among the thieves, forcing them to scatter in every direction. A few attempted to grab him, but Blaze was too quick, weaving through the shadows and pounding the ground with his hooves in a relentless rhythm. Taking advantage of the confusion, Ashley grabbed Aurora's reins and began leading her out of the corral. The other horses, driven by instinct, followed, forming a ragged but determined line as they moved toward the camp's exit. "Don't let her take the horses," one of the men shouted, recovering from the chaos. But it was too late. The stampede had begun, and Ashley, astride Aurora, led the charge. Blaze closed ranks, ensuring no one could get close enough to stop them. The path out of the camp was narrow and steep, but Ashley knew every twist in stone thanks to the day she had spent studying the terrain. The horses thundered behind her, their hooves striking the ground with force, the sound echoing through the canyon walls. "Come on, Aurora, you can do it," she urged, leaning forward to help the mare maintain her pace. Behind them, the thieves' shouts faded into the distance, swallowed by the night. Blaze, showing an almost superhuman endurance, stayed close to Ashley, keeping a watchful eye to ensure no one followed. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into an open area. The lights of the camp were now far behind them, and the echoes of their pursuers had disappeared. "We made it," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. But there was no time to celebrate. Ashley knew the men wouldn't give up so easily. She had to ensure they were captured before they regrouped and launched another attack. She remembered the whistle her father had given her before she left. Pulling it from her pocket, she pressed it to her lips and blew as hard as she could. The piercing sound sliced through the mountain air, a desperate call for help. "Let's hope they hear it," she thought as she tucked the whistle away and turned to check on the horses. Aurora, though still weak, seemed more spirited, as if Ashley's presence alone gave her strength. Blaze, on the other hand, remained on high alert, ears flicking in all directions, ready to react at the first sign of trouble. "Thank you, my friend," Ashley murmured, stepping closer to stroke his neck. "I couldn't have done it without you." Blaze snorted softly, as if acknowledging her gratitude. In the distance, the faint wail of sirens broke the stillness of the night. Relief washed over Ashley as she realized the police were on their way. "Everything's going to be okay," she said aloud, her conviction growing. Surrounded by the horses she had fought so hard to save, Ashley felt a deep sense of pride and exhaustion. She had faced her greatest challenge yet, and though the danger wasn't entirely behind her, she knew she had taken the first step toward reclaiming what rightfully belonged to her family. As dawn began to streak the horizon, Ashley, with Aurora leading the way and Blaze at her side, approached the gates of Hope Ranch. Behind her, the rescued horses moved in a steady line, kicking up a faint trail of dust along the road. Though weariness weighed heavily on her shoulders, Ashley was filled with satisfaction and relief. Each step forward reminded her of how far she had come. From the house, Mr. William leaned on the doorframe with his cane, his gaze lifting at the sound of hooves. At first, he blinked as though unable to believe what he was seeing. Then his expression shifted, and his usually stern, hard eyes glimmered with a mix of pride and restrained emotion. "Dad!" Ashley shouted, waving her hand in the air as she approached. Mr. Williams stepped out slowly, his gait labored but steady, his eyes never leaving his daughter. As she reached the ranch's paddock, Ashley swiftly dismounted Aurora and ran toward him. "I did it," she said, her smile reflecting the courage and determination that had driven her through her journey. Without saying a word, Mr. William embraced her tightly, something he hadn't done in a very long time. "I'm so proud of you, my girl," he murmured, his voice breaking with emotion. The ranch hands guided the horses back into the corral, casting wary glances at the approaching storm clouds. Among the herd was the imposing black horse, once seen as an omen of failure and chaos. Now it stood calm, commanding attention. "That's the horse they called a demon," one worker muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "How's he so quiet now?" Ashley overheard and stepped closer, her hand resting firmly yet tenderly on the horse's neck. "He was never a demon," she said softly. "He just needed someone to believe in him." Word of Ashley's triumphant return spread quickly through the small town. Soon neighbors began arriving at the ranch, eager to hear the tale of how she had faced down the thieves and reclaimed not just Aurora, but all the stolen horses. "You're a hero, Ashley," one woman exclaimed, and others nodded in admiration. Ashley, though appreciative of the praise, responded with humility. "I didn't do it alone," she said, glancing at the black horse with gratitude in her eyes. Later that afternoon, police officers arrived with news. The thieves had been captured. "Thanks to your quick thinking, we were able to track them down before they could flee," one officer explained. "The horses you recovered provided all the evidence we needed to charge them." Hearing those words, Ashley felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to relax. "Thank you," she said to the officer, her voice weary but full of relief. "Thank you for helping us reclaim what was ours." Over the following days, Hope Ranch began to stir back to life. The rescued horses settled in quickly, and with the neighbors' help, the stables were repaired. Under Ashley's care, Aurora regained her strength, her graceful trot returning as if nothing had happened. Yet it was the black horse, once dubbed a menace, that captivated everyone. His transformation became a symbol of resilience and hope, not just for the ranch, but for the entire community. "That horse is a miracle," people would say, and Ashley couldn't have agreed more. As Christmas Eve arrived, the ranch buzzed with activity. Ashley and Mr. William, joined by the ranch hands and some neighbors, decorated the house with glowing string lights and a simple but elegant wreath. The dining table was laden with hearty homemade dishes, filling the air with rich, comforting aromas. Laughter and cheerful chatter echoed through the rooms. That night, as the clock struck midnight, Ashley sat beside her father by the fireplace. Mr. William, cradling a mug of coffee in his hands, gazed into the flames with a peaceful expression. "You know something, son," he said, breaking the silence. "I always thought running this ranch took strength, but now I see what it truly requires is heart, and you have more of that than I ever imagined." Ashley smiled, feeling his words wash away years of doubt and fear. "Thank you, Dad, but I've learned so much from you. Your strength has always been my guide." Mr. William nodded, his eyes glistening in the firelight. "Then I suppose this ranch has found its new leader." As the night deepened, Ashley stepped out onto the porch. Snow, rare for their region, fell softly, blanketing the ranch in a glistening layer of white under the moonlight. From the corral, the black horse raised his head, meeting her gaze. "We did it, buddy," she said quietly. "Everything's as it should be." In that moment, her thoughts turned to her late mother and the stories she used to tell about how life's hardest trials often led to the most beautiful rewards. "Thank you, Mom," Ashley whispered, looking up at the sky, "for teaching me to never give up." That Christmas Eve at Hope Ranch became a cherished memory, a testament to love, sacrifice, and the unyielding spirit of hope. And for Ashley, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where the strength of her heart would always be her compass. The journey at Hope Ranch is not merely a tale of overcoming adversity, it is a powerful testament to resilience, love, and the unwavering belief in change. From the heart-stopping moments when the prized horses were stolen to the touching scenes where Ashley, with relentless courage, worked to restore her family's legacy, this story reminds us that no matter how daunting the challenges, a strong heart and determination can turn the tide. As old wounds heal and hope is rekindled with every step forward, the heartwarming reunion at Hope Ranch stands as a symbol of new beginnings and the triumph of the human spirit. If you found this story as inspiring and moving as we did, make sure to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Each story is a journey filled with emotion and a message about the strength within us all and our deep connection to nature. Subscribe today and join our community of nature lovers and inspirational souls. And let's continue exploring more incredible stories together.